With Robinhood, not only can you trade individual stocks and ETFs, you can also seamlessly buy and sell crypto at low costs. Trade all in one place. Get started now on Robinhood. Trading crypto involves significant risk. Crypto trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Crypto held through Robinhood Crypto is not FDIC insured or SIPC protected. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Securities trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Welcome back to Mama Mystery. I am your host, Kelly, and today we are talking about a case that really piqued my interest last week when I discussed it on the weekly docket. It kind of came to a conclusion last week, and so I thought today would be a good day to kind of give you the full story, the deep dive on all the details. So we're talking about James and Angela Craig, and from the outside looking in, James and Angela Craig had it all. A thriving dental practice, a beautiful home in Aurora, Colorado, and a busy family life raising 6 kids. They were the kind of couple that a lot of people admired, but beneath that picture-perfect surface was, of course, a much darker reality, as there so often is. Secrets, affairs, and financial desperation really set the stage for a sinister plot that unfolded rather quietly, methodically, and right under Angela's nose. So today I'm diving into exactly what Dr. James Craig was accused of, this seemingly devoted husband and respected dentist who was accused of really the unthinkable. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear proves once again that sometimes the deadliest threats come from those who are closest to us. James Tolliver Craig was a well-regarded dentist in Aurora, Colorado, and by all outward appearances, he was a devoted family man. He and his wife, Angela Dawn Craig, had been married for 23 years, and they were raising their 6 children together. Angela often helped out at James's dental practice, which was called Summerbrook Dental, working as an office manager and actively contributing ideas. And the two were like 2 peas in a pod, as one former employee put it. Friends and patients saw them as the perfect team. They were church-going, family-oriented, and deeply involved in their community. Angela, who was 43 years old, was the youngest of 10 siblings and known for her outgoing, caring personality. She loved being a mother most of all, and relatives described her as organized, strong, and always happy, who took care of the people around her. James, who was 45, had built a successful career as a dentist. He taught dentistry actually for a time and even founded a program for international dental students early in his career. By 2023, he was the president of his own dental group and had a reputation for professionalism and compassion with his patients. Together, James and Angela seemed to have this perfect, charmed life. They spent time outdoors with their kids, they took camping and skiing trips, and they were very active in their church. But behind this wholesome image, trouble had been brewing, as it so often is when we talk about these stories. But privately, the Craigs' marriage had serious strains. Friends and family would later reveal that James had been unfaithful to Angela multiple times. In fact, Angela discovered an affair in 2018. James actually confessed to her that he had been cheating on her for 6 months, leaving Angela devastated and sobbing to her sister. The couple stayed together reportedly for the sake of their family and their faith because they were practicing Mormons, but James's infidelity did not stop. In fact, he had a lot of affairs over the years, often arranging liaisons through a dating site for married sugar daddies. Angela learned of at least one more affair in 2022, and the two had struggled in private with those betrayals. On the surface, Angela put on a brave face. She was private about their marital problems, and according to the defense, she really wanted to keep her family together, especially because of their faith. But still, those who knew the couple sensed that something was deeply broken in the marriage, despite their smiles in public. And then, of course, financial problems added even further stress. By 2020, James's dental practice was in serious trouble. He went through personal and business bankruptcy and brought in a friend, Dr. Ryan Redfern, as a partner to help keep the business afloat. So Dr. Ryan Redfern and James had actually been buddies since dental school, and Ryan's investment helped at a pretty desperate time. Prosecutors later revealed that James was carrying over $2 million in liabilities, and Angela had a hefty life insurance policy worth $3.4 million. So obviously that's money that could certainly ease the pressure. So with 6 children, a failing business, a string of affairs, and a wife who he apparently felt trapped in a marriage with, James Tolliver Craig was, as his own defense put it, a broken man by early 2023. But unfortunately, instead of fixing his problems honorably like a real man, James began formulating a horrific solution. In late February of 2023, James Craig set in motion a plan to kill his wife quietly and without detection. The scheme he envisioned was chilling. Use poison to slowly sicken Angela and then make her death look like a mystery illness or even a natural event. Just days after returning from a dental conference in Las Vegas on February 23rd, James secretly ordered arsenic online. Not coincidentally, that Vegas trip is actually where he had met a new love interest, Dr. Karen Kane, an orthodontist from Texas. The two had struck up an emotionally involved affair, exchanging over 4,000 text messages. And James led Karen to believe that he was about to divorce Angela. Now, Karen would later testify that she had absolutely nothing to do with any crime and had no idea that James's wife was actually being poisoned. But with a new mistress waiting in the wings and financial pressures mounting, James's motive for murder appeared to be a mix of money problems and other women. So on March 4th of 2023, a package containing arsenic arrived at the Craigs' home while Angela was away visiting family in Utah. And this was step 1 of James's plan. He had done his homework. Investigators later found that he had created a new Gmail account with the alias Jim and Waffles, and used it to search online for things like, quote, how many grams of pure arsenic will kill a human, end quote. And then he also watched YouTube videos titled Top 5 Undetectable Poisons That Show No Sign of Foul Play. Now, armed with this knowledge and now with the actual poison in hand, James was ready to act. The following week, Angela returned home to Aurora on March 6th, and James wasted no time. That morning, he made Angela a protein shake, a gesture that he often did as a caring husband, except this time, investigators believed that he laced it with arsenic. Not long after finishing her drink and starting a workout, Angela fell terribly ill. She texted James at work saying, quote, my stomach feels fine, but my head feels funny and dizzy. Very strange, end quote. And then a few minutes later, she sent another alarming message saying, I feel drugged. Now, James responded with a concerned-sounding text and rushed home to take Angela to the emergency room at Parker Adventist Hospital. It was the first of several baffling hospital visits. Angela arrived dizzy, nauseated, and disoriented, all classic signs of poisoning, although nobody realized it at the time. Doctors ran tests, but they couldn't pinpoint a cause, and after a night of observation, Angela was sent home with instructions to rest. Angela herself was puzzled and worried. Once home, she started Googling her symptoms, wondering if she might have something like vertigo or a stroke or another neurological issue, but poison was not on her radar. Now, meanwhile, James was already covering his tracks and prepping the next phase of his plan. The evening of March 6th, after Angela had been discharged, one of James's employees noticed something odd. Dr. Craig was still at the dental office late at night, hunched over a computer in one of his exam rooms, even though he had a private office. Shortly after, that same staffer received a text from James instructing her not to open a personal package that would be delivered to the office. Instead, he said to just put it on his desk for him. Now, this struck the employee as kind of strange at the time, but she complied, and she didn't know it yet, but James was expecting a delivery of potassium cyanide, an even deadlier poison that he had just ordered online under that alias email. James's poison shopping spree didn't end with arsenic and cyanide. He attempted to obtain a rare toxin called oleandrin from the poisonous oleander plant through a chemical supplier. Now, if you guys have watched Ginny and Georgia on Netflix, I'm pretty sure this is the flower that, I don't think it's a spoiler. But the mom had an oleander plant, like a flower. I'm pretty sure. I might actually be wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, I remembered that random detail. So when the company asked James to clarify his intended use, since oleandrin is a controlled substance, James lied that he was a researcher doing a craniofacial reconstruction study, and he provided a professional license number and claimed that he'd publish a paper with the National Institutes of Health. But in reality, he was casting about for any undetectable poison that might finish off his wife. The oleandrin order never went through. The supplier actually hesitated, and James eventually stopped responding to their questions. But it just shows how far he was willing to go. James also bought 12 bottles of Visine eye drops on March 8th, clearing out a local store's stock. Now, Visine contains tetrahydrozoline, which is a chemical that in large doses can cause life-threatening symptoms, and which would also be found later in Angela's body. So with arsenic, cyanide, and now a full bag of eye drop bottles, James had an arsenal of poison just right there at his disposal. So over the next few days of early March 2023, Angela Craig fell ill repeatedly in what must have felt like a nightmare that just kept coming back. On March 9th, after a relatively okay week following her first hospital trip, Angela suddenly collapsed at her house. That morning, she had had another smoothie prepared by James, who had kept playing this role of the doting and concerned and attentive husband, and a few hours later, Angela's children found her passed out. She was rushed to the hospital again, a second ER visit in only 3 days, and Angela's symptoms this time were even more severe. Extreme dizziness, weakness, and a racing heart that spiked dangerously at one point. Doctors were stumped. They admitted her for extensive testing, suspecting perhaps a metabolic or heart problem. Angela was poked, prodded, and put on monitors as specialists tried to figure out why this otherwise healthy 43-year-old woman was suddenly so sick. While Angela fought for her life in the hospital, James hovered by her side and, according to prosecutors, continued his covert poisoning attempts. Hospital records and trial testimony later suggested that Angela's condition skyrocketed right after James visited her bedside on March 9th. In fact, an arsenic test from her March 9th blood work came back positive for toxic levels of arsenic. It appears James's initial arsenic dosing wasn't finished. He may have slipped more poison into something that Angela either ate or drank in the hospital, or possibly even dosed her before the ambulance, but remarkably, Angela survived this second crisis. And over the next few days in the hospital, her condition finally stabilized. By March 14th, Angela was well enough to be discharged home, although she still didn't have any answers. She left the hospital exhausted and frightened, telling her brother that she felt like she was shaking internally and knew something was very wrong with her body. Angela, being ever proactive, once again tried to diagnose herself, considering everything from diabetes to a stroke, but each guess was just a dead end. Throughout these ordeals, James outwardly played the doting, worried spouse. He kept Angela's family in the loop with a flurry of group text messages about her condition. And for example, on March 12th, he texted Angela's siblings saying that he was spending the night at the hospital with her, and even described a scare when nurses rushed in because Angela's oxygen dropped. Now, oddly, he claimed he'd been asleep and heard her snoring loudly at the time, which is a detail that Angela's brother kind of found suspicious. But he also reassured Angela repeatedly via text of his love and concern. In one exchange that came up later, James texted Angela saying, quote, "Given our history, I know that must be triggering. Just for the record, I didn't drug you," end quote, after she told him that she had felt drugged. Now, that strange message hinted that Angela herself harbored some private suspicions, perhaps recalling a past incident. So there was speculation that James had once drugged her in the past to help her sleep, which Angela had mentioned to a friend. But regardless, Angela seemed to accept James's denials in 2023 and did not publicly accuse him of anything at the time. I also heard another version of that detail where he had drugged Angela to help her sleep so that he could then kill himself without being interrupted. So it was kind of like this favor that he was doing for Angela, or that's at least how he tried to portray it to her, saying that, he essentially drugged her just so that she would sleep and not interfere with his plan to kill himself. So kind of a stretch, but behind closed doors, James was juggling his lethal plot and affair simultaneously. Dr. Karen Kane, his new mistress, was still in contact with him constantly. She was scheduled to fly from Texas to Colorado on March 16th for a little romantic rendezvous under the belief that James was separated from Angela. So as Angela languished in the hospital around March 12th through the 14th, Karen emailed James expressing sympathy, saying, quote, "Hi, honey, I am so sorry for what has transpired this week in your world. I am praying for you and seeking God's wisdom for this time. I love you," end quote. So she was aware that Angela was gravely ill and still kind of having this relationship, like she's trying to juggle her romantic feelings for James and sympathy for his wife. It's just kind of crazy. But James lied to Karen about the situation, claiming that he had filed for divorce and was living in an apartment separate from Angela, when in truth he was oscillating between poisoning his wife at the hospital and sending lovey-dovey messages to his mistress. And I don't know what level of sociopathy you have to be to like carry on those two worlds, like where you have a mistress out of Texas that you're flirting with and making plans with, and then you have a dying wife in the hospital. Like the level of sociopathy is actually kind of mind-boggling. And it's scary to think that someone who is a trained doctor, a medical professional, because it's arguably quite hard to become a doctor, right? You have to be pretty smart. But when they act like this, it just blows my mind, and it just furthers the belief that I have, that is that you can be so book smart and have no common sense. And I feel like I see that played out a lot in stories like this. But anyway, Angela returned home on March 14th of 2023. She was weak, but she was hopeful that the worst was behind her. However, sadly, James had one more decisive act in store. On the morning of March 15th, Angela's brother Mark, who had driven in from Utah to kind of help with the family, was at the house caring for her. James was eager to get a particular medicine into Angela, and it was clindamycin, an antibiotic that he had obtained purportedly for a sinus infection that Angela had developed. He insisted to Mark that Angela needed to take her 10 a.m. dose of this antibiotic, and even texted a reminder about it. So trusting his brother-in-law, because James was a doctor after all, Mark helped Angela take the capsules, giving her a little oatmeal beforehand so that the meds wouldn't upset her stomach. But within 20 minutes, Angela's condition nosedived catastrophically. She couldn't even hold herself up, Mark later testified. Around 11 a.m., they raced back to the ER yet again, with Angela vomiting, fading in and out of consciousness, collapsing as they arrived at the hospital. But this time, there would be no recovery.
With Robinhood, not only can you trade individual stocks and ETFs, you can also seamlessly buy and sell crypto at low costs. Trade all in one place. Get started now on Robinhood. Trading crypto involves significant risk. Crypto trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Crypto held through Robinhood Crypto is not FDIC insured or SIPC protected. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Securities trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer.
I want to pause again, though, to reflect on exactly what this all means. The fact that he gave his brother-in-law, so Angela's biological brother, exactly the poison that he intended to give Angela to kill her, but he was going to, make Mark this liaison to kind of finish the job. I can't imagine the guilt that Mark carries because of that. And just sociopathy that it would take for somebody to allow this to happen, to allow Mark to do this to his own sister unknowingly and then know what Mark would have to carry with him for the rest of his life. Like, I cannot imagine that. Now, once Angela got to the hospital, emergency staff at Anschutz Hospital in Aurora worked frantically to stabilize her on March 15th, but her body was shutting down. She was intubated and placed on a ventilator as her organs failed. Essentially, Angela Craig was brain dead by that afternoon. Unbeknownst to everyone at the moment, those clindamycin capsules had been tampered with. Prosecutors say that James filled them with potassium cyanide, and it was a diabolical trick. Cyanide acts much faster and more lethally than arsenic, especially if it's hidden in a pill. Later toxicology would show that Angela's blood cyanide level spiked to a lethal concentration on March 15th after that final dose. At the hospital that day, James continued his performance as the distraught husband, but cracks were already starting to show. Angela's brother Mark noted that when James arrived at the ICU, he only stayed briefly before claiming that he had to return to work to take care of some things, promising to come back later. He did return in the afternoon, even bringing sandwiches for Mark and himself as they waited by Angela's bedside. At one point, however, James urged Mark to go home and rest, saying that as Angela's husband, he would stay with her and Mark didn't need to be there all day. Mark reluctantly agreed, feeling that spouses kind of trump brothers, I guess, when it came to like a hospital vigil, and then left James alone with Angela in her room that afternoon. What happened in the next minute or two is a matter of inference, but prosecutors believe this is when James administered one final fatal dose to his wife. A security camera photo from the ICU later showed James holding a syringe as he entered Angela's room. Within moments after he was alone with her, Angela crashed. She went into cardiac arrest or a similar crisis, requiring a code blue response. Nurses and doctors swarmed the room trying to resuscitate her. In the chaos, James slipped out into the hallway and watched from a distance as staff fought to save Angela's life. Mark, who hadn't gotten far, was summoned back by a phone call, saying that Angela had taken a grave turn. When he arrived, he found the ICU in a madhouse of activity and was shocked to see James sitting off by the nurse's station, not at Angela's side. Shortly after, Angela was declared brain dead. She had no neurological activity, kept alive only by machines. The doctors informed the family there was nothing more that they could do. Even as his wife lay dying, James was multitasking, coordinating with his mistress. He texted Dr. Karen Kane a photo of Angela intubated in the ICU and told her that he was going dark for a while due to a family emergency. Astonishingly, he then asked Karen if she was still coming to Denver as planned. And Karen, upon learning Angela's condition, did not come. She emailed James that day saying that she had absolutely nothing to do with this tragedy and wanted to just cut off contact. The gall and coldness of James's communications that day would later horrify investigators, that as Angela laid dying, he was effectively lining up his next romantic rendezvous. Like, what the F is wrong with you? I don't know how many times, I feel like every episode I come to a point where I just want to sit back and say, what the fuck is wrong with you? But it is the most unanswerable question, which is why we've got over 200 episodes on this podcast. Every episode we try to figure it out, and I don't think we ever will. But by the evening of March 15th, Angela Craig was on life support with no brain activity, and those around her started to sense that something about this just did not add up. One particular person was putting the pieces together, and it was James's close friend and business partner, Ryan Redfern, that I mentioned earlier. That same day, one of James's employees at the dental office had reached out to Ryan with an urgent tip. She told him about two strange things. One was James's late-night computer session on March 6th and the package that James warned them not to open. Now, this employee had since learned, likely through office gossip or maybe seeing a label, that the package contained potassium cyanide. She felt like she had to speak up now that Angela was fighting for her life. And when Ryan heard this, alarm bells rang. Potassium cyanide? Why on earth would his friend Jim Craig be ordering that, especially with his wife gravely ill? Ryan and his wife Michelle rushed to the hospital that night. On the way, Ryan called a nurse on Angela's care team and urgently disclosed that James recently ordered potassium cyanide and there was no medical reason for a dentist to have that. So this was obviously a bombshell piece of information. The ICU nurse, bound by mandatory reporting rules, immediately notified the authorities. And within a matter of hours on March 15th, Aurora's police homicide unit had detectives at the hospital quietly launching an investigation. That night, confronted indirectly by his friend's betrayal, James scrambled to do some damage control. He called Ryan Redfern on his cell phone while Ryan was still at the hospital parking lot and asked nervously, "Did you say anything to the staff?" Well, Ryan didn't play along. He flatly told James yes. He had alerted a nurse that they knew what was in the package. James stammered that the cyanide package was actually a surprise ring for Angela, which is a fucking absurd lie. But Ryan cut him off saying, "It's not a ring. We know what was in there." In that instant, a 20-year friendship shattered. Ryan later said he watched James break down crying after talking to doctors about Angela's prognosis, but he doubted that those were genuine tears. To Ryan, it now looked like James had been poisoning Angela, and her mysterious illness suddenly made horrible sense, and those tears were probably more so because he got caught. Early the next morning, March 16th, James made one last attempt to save himself, and he sent a desperate text to Ryan, essentially begging him to stop cooperating with police. And I laugh because it's just like, wow, this guy was a dentist. Like, how? I have so many questions. But in his text, he wrote, quote, "I want to make an urgent plea to you. Please don't talk to anyone, including any law enforcement officers. You are under no obligation to answer their questions, and you will do more damage than good to my family by continuing to insert yourself into this." End quote. It was obviously a pretty shocking message, effectively asking his friend to stay quiet and in turn help cover up a potential murder. Prosecutors would later highlight that text as near proof of guilt. But the damage was already done. Ryan had talked, and investigators were now fully engaged. On March 18th of 2023, Angela Craig was removed from life support and pronounced dead. The mother of 6 was gone, and an autopsy was ordered to find out why a healthy woman had perished so suddenly. The preliminary toxicology tests were already pointing to a crime. They detected lethal amounts of cyanide in Angela's blood, as well as tetrahydrozoline, which is the Visine. And when the coroner later completed the autopsy, it confirmed Angela died from poison. Specifically, her cause of death, was lethal concentrations of cyanide along with the lethal amount of tetrahydrozoline, which is, of course, the chemical in eye drops. And the autopsy also noted toxic concentrations of arsenic in samples from Angela's earlier hospitalizations, meaning that she had been ingesting arsenic in the days before her death. In short, the medical evidence lined up with a prolonged poisoning. Angela didn't stand a chance against this invisible killer. Aurora police, already suspicious thanks to Ryan's tip, didn't wait for all the lab results to arrest James Craig. They had plenty of immediate evidence: the unopened bottles of potassium cyanide recovered from his office package, records of his online orders, Angela's own texts expressing that she had felt drugged, and witness statements from hospital staff and family. So on March 19th of 2023, less than 48 hours after Angela's death, James Craig was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. A stunned former patient recalled hearing the news saying, "There's my dentist, a mugshot." Like, can you imagine that? Your dentist just seeing him, like his corny little driver's license picture. I'll share it on our Instagram, and I'll actually put it on the cover art for this episode. So I've been trying to kind of incorporate something new with our cover art so that you don't have to like look up the pictures of the people that we're talking about. But that picture, I mean, can you imagine that being your dentist and then seeing him with, this accusation of murder? Like, I can't fathom it, but I love my dentist. So, and she would never do that. Now, following James's arrest, the full depth of his actions began to surface. Investigators combed through his digital devices and found the incriminating search history and his email records, and it was all laid out in a 52-page arrest affidavit that one veteran journalist called the most unbelievable and thorough affidavit he'd ever read. And I can attest to that because I read it also, and I was shocked when I opened up the PDF, because you can find arrest affidavits, you can find court documents fairly easily online as long as they're not like under a gag order, I guess. But this, I mean, it is long. There are so many screenshots of text messages. Like, it is incredibly thorough. There are pages upon pages just littered with screenshots. It's like a grid of just screenshots between him and various people. One of the people that he was talking to was a friend named Michelle. Now, Michelle was a professor and had a PhD in nursing. So she had asked James to keep her updated on Angela's symptoms to potentially assist in diagnosing her. And Michelle provided all of the screenshots of all of the text messages between her and James beginning March 9th. And it's kind of interesting to just see the way that he's like talking to Michelle. And it's eerie now looking at them, knowing that he knew all along why Angela was sick. But, at one point Michelle offers to help and he says, "Thanks for offering, but for now I think we've got more support than we can handle. Gotta love the church." In another text, and they're like going back and forth with all this like medical jargon. And at one point he says to Michelle, "If it wasn't my wife, this would be kind of a fun puzzle to try to work out!" Exclamation point. Like, what? Your wife is dying and you guys have no idea why, and you're treating it like a fun puzzle? And I actually want to read the entire message that he sent to Ryan because it is so long that it took up 4 and a half screenshots. So that's just tells you like how long the message actually was. But he had tried, James Craig tried calling Dr. Ryan Redfern, and Ryan didn't answer. And so James texted Ryan this long text, and honestly, like, what an idiot. I love it when like criminal idiots just kind of hand over their guilt on a silver platter or just like make complete fools of themselves like this. So the text message says, "Good morning, Ryan. Thank you for taking my patient load today. I want to make an urgent plea to you. If we were ever friends, please do this favor for me. Please don't talk to anyone about what we talked about last night, including any law enforcement officers. You are under no obligation to answer their questions unless you are served a subpoena, and you will do more damage than good to my family by continuing to insert yourself into this. Angela is gone, and I am devastated. There is nothing that can bring her back, and I want desperately to tell you all of the details so that you can better understand what's gone on behind the scenes with her. There is so much that you don't know that I wish you did. If you knew everything, this would make so much sense to you, but there's no use in telling you right now. You and I have a history of you and the other partners and Jackie all talking about me behind my back and deciding what you think is best, and then you're always the fall guy that has to pull the trigger or tell me what you've all decided about me. In fact, yesterday you didn't even come to me. I had to seek you out. You have never given me the advantage of talking with me first. You just decide and then act and hope I'll pick up the pieces later. This is a pattern in our business dealings and now has become a factor in our personal dealings. Let me paint a picture for you of what this has done. Yesterday, I had to tell my kids their mom was not going to wake up and they were going to say their final goodbyes. That was at 6:45 p.m. The hospital said we could bring the kids up to say goodbye at that time, but because of the investigation you opened by your incomplete information, the hospital made those poor, grieving, hysterical kids wait until 10 p.m. to see their mom. After an hour or so of saying goodbye to her, we went home just before midnight, only to have our house sealed against our entry by the police. Instead of getting to go home and find comfort, they were met with flashing lights and cold, unfeeling cops, and the kids, scared and confused, had to go sleep at the home of a ward member. Family is starting to come into town today, and I have to tell them they can't come to my house and try to explain why. I have to hire a homicide attorney to make sure I don't end up being painted in the light that you know some hungry DA is anxious to paint me in, because I am most likely going to be charged, even though that is absolutely not what happened. Ryan, I understand why you did what you did. I do. I get it. But if you had come to me personally, man to man, instead of talking to everyone else about what you thought you knew, I might have let you in on some details that would have made you less likely to cause this horrible storm. Man, Ryan, if you had only, in all caps, put me higher on your list of priorities instead of putting everyone else's opinions and gossip ahead of me, ! For that, I am very, very mad at you. I have talked to you about this multiple times, but you don't seem to care, and now what you thought was responsible has become reckless and so destructive. And so I'm asking, if there was ever any love in your heart for me, please don't make this any worse by talking to any officers or anyone else about this unless you are legally forced to. And whoever else on the team you think is going to be questioned, I would ask that you privately ask them to honor this request too. Also, please do not respond to this text message until I text you again. End scene. And I hope you guys liked that dramatic reading. I should read audiobooks, be a narrator. Anyway, I just had to read that entire text because I remember when this case first came out and the affidavit came out, and I remember talking about it. It was so long ago though. And I knew that there was this really long dramatic text that James wrote to Ryan. So I'm really glad that I was able to find that and reread it for you. But if you thought the case ended there and that it was so, cut and dry and just case closed, you would be wrong. Because after James was arrested and he was in jail awaiting trial, unbelievably, he tried to engineer a cover-up from behind bars. He wrote a letter to one of his adult daughters asking her to record a fake video in which Angela would appear to say that she was choosing to end her life or even framing James. So in other words, he wanted his daughter to help concoct evidence that Angela had been suicidal and basically killed herself by poisoning herself. His family naturally refused this request, but he didn't stop there. He also approached a fellow inmate in jail and offered to pay to have the lead detective on his case murdered, hoping to derail the investigation entirely. Now, these jailhouse plots were swiftly discovered by authorities and led to additional felony charges against James, including 2 counts of solicitation to tamper with evidence, 2 counts of solicitation of perjury, and 1 count of solicitation to commit murder. So by the time James's case went to trial, the prosecution had mountains of evidence and 5 extra charges tacked on because of his scheming in jail. This guy will not learn his lesson. James Craig pleaded not guilty to all of the charges, and his case finally went before a jury in the summer of 2025. In a 2-week trial that really riveted Colorado, dozens of witnesses testified, including former mistresses like Dr. Karen Kane and even an ex from a sugar daddy website. And I'm sorry that I chuckle at moments like that. It's just I love to see stupid criminals, especially stupid men and stupid women, get embarrassed because they deserve to be embarrassed. So anyway, Angela's siblings also testified, James's employees testified, and multiple medical experts. The prosecution laid out the narrative that we've walked through. This husband who spent 10 days killing his wife by spiking her protein shakes and even her cold medicine. And they argued that there was no doubt James did it, pointing to the timeline of poison purchases and Angela's symptom pattern. The motive was painted pretty clear. James wanted out of a marriage that he found to be suffocating, but he didn't want a messy divorce. And instead, killing Angela would free him to be with his mistresses and cash in over $3 million of life insurance. So the defense, for its part, attempted an unusual strategy. They admitted James was a flawed man, a serial cheater in a broken marriage, but they floated the theory that Angela might have killed herself or that James only assisted her suicide at her request. That's just so incredibly desperate. But they claimed that Angela was depressed or wanted attention, actually said that, wanted attention, and that there was no direct evidence that James put poison in her drinks since no cyanide was found in the home blender, for example. The defense even suggested Angela, being aware of James's affairs, might have staged her own poisoning to make him suffer. It was a desperate reach by far, to put it lightly, but on July 30th of 2025, so just last week, which is why I covered it in the weekly docket last week, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, which was that James Craig was found guilty on every count, first-degree murder, and all 5 solicitation charges. In Colorado, a first-degree murder conviction carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which the judge imposed immediately. As the verdict was read, James stood silent and showed little emotion, while Angela's loved ones wept in relief and also sorrow. One of the Craig's daughters addressed her father in a heart-wrenching victim impact statement, telling him he would always be the villain in her book. Angela's sister Toni lambasted James in court, saying, quote, "Her life was not yours to take. Angela loved her children, and unfortunately, she loved you." And Angela's brother Mark, who had unwittingly been used as part of the murder, said that he was haunted by the fact that he killed her right under his nose. The family expressed relief that justice was served, even though it was bittersweet. But Mark actually said they've known that he was guilty since the very beginning. And so this wasn't really a shock to them. They're just relieved that now he doesn't have to be a part of their lives anymore. Now James Craig, once a respected dentist, church member, and family man, will spend the rest of his life behind bars. James Craig, once a respected dentist, church member, and family man, will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. And in the end, the evidence showed that the kindly Dr. Craig was living a lie. Behind the smiles, he was a calculating killer who poisoned the mother of his children. Angela's death was slow, agonizing. Make no mistake, this was a horrific way to die, and I can't imagine anyone choosing this for themselves, which just makes their defense strategy that much more desperate. As Angela's family moves forward, they remember her as a vibrant, loving woman whose life was stolen far too soon. And as for James, in the words of his own daughter, he will forever be a villain for what he did. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Mama Mystery. If you haven't already, make sure that you're subscribed to my channel so that you never miss a new episode. And we will see you hopefully on Friday for the weekly docket. I am traveling this week with my daughter. We're doing like a little mommy-daughter trip this week. And so I'm going to try to get the weekly docket out, but I don't know if I can pull it off. We'll see. Anyway, with that, stay curious, stay vigilant. Mama Mystery out. Bye.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.